Good evening, YouTube. This is Amisbro. Oh boy. Okay. So, for this video, we're going to be talking about a video game. And it's one I've literally just beaten. And it's one that has haunted me for years. For many years, actually. Probably since, I don't know, I was a little kid. Actually, I wasn't that little. I was about maybe 10. Story goes that a relative of my brother, he had a daughter, and they owned a game. They owned this particular game, which is referred to as the Guardian Legend. And I played it for the first time, and I sucked horribly at it. Years later, I actually picked up a copy on the NES for like $2 at a Funko Land. Now, I'm going to come clean and I'm going to tell you, no, I used an emulator for this, but that does not diminish one thing. This game is hard as fuck. The difficulty is not something you mess with. You know how there's like easy, normal, hard, and there's like Nintendo hard? This one was like a whole other level. This is a game which, if you've never heard of it because you didn't really play a lot of third-party games, or you tried to stay within the mainstream third-party, you missed out on a genuine classic. You really did. Maybe that's a good thing, because then you can still get a copy for like $2. But this game, whew, man, I just beat it like 30 minutes ago or so, and I'm still in shock. Because you have to understand that ever since I had gotten my own copy of the game, and then playing it through whatever means, even if it was an emulator, that to me didn't diminish the fact that what I was accomplishing little by little as I was moving up the ladder made this even more heart-pounding and more exhilarating as time went on. And shout out to the YouTube channel Retromancers, because they did a playthrough of the game and it kicked me in the ass to make me want to redo it again and to try again, because goddamn, I wasn't letting this game beat me. I wasn't going to give up on accomplishing my mission on finally beating this game from my childhood. But with that said, what is the Guardian Legend? What is its story? What are its gameplay mechanics? And how does it work? Well, let me tell you. The story of the game revolves around a planet called Naju. And, excuse me. On this planet, it was relatively peaceful until some alien life forms came on and got a little rowdy and decided they wanted to take it, knock it out of its orbit, and hurl it towards Earth. That's a problem, because Earth's going to die. So what do? Well, Earth did what the only thing they knew how to do. They made an Aerobot, which would be called the Guardian of Earth, and they sent it to Naju with one mission: blow it the fuck up before it got to Earth. But how does one accomplish this? Well, this game uses a few different mechanics. And for those of you who remember a game that I believe was on the NSX called Gerudik, this is effectively its sequel, Gerudik Gaiden, or the Guardian Legend. How does the game actually work? Well, let's start from the beginning. When the game starts, you're trying to fly onto the planet, and to do that you have to bust out some gun installations. Which, trust me, you think it's easy. You don't know how many times when I was a kid I died on that when I first played the game, because I sucked horribly and I didn't know what I was doing. That's just being honest. I didn't know what I was doing at all. Well, once you get on the planet, you realize it's actually not just a top-down shooter. There's more to it, and that's what makes this game really, really unique. It is a top-down shooter in one part, but in another part, it's almost like a Zelda game. Almost. It would be like if Zelda was a female Aerobot, because we found it is known that the lead character is a female, and had a gun. Well, what happens is you run around the planet and you shoot up life forms. Now, when you start, there's one hub level, and there's only one planet, and there's only one corridor you can go to. To be clear, the way this game works, there's 10 areas, and there's 21 corridors. Now, the main corridors that you must go through are corridors 1 through 10. The optional corridors are 11 to 20. The only way to get to corridor 21, which is at the very center of the main area, is to break off the seals for the main 10 corridors. But to do that, you have to get in them, and each one has a different mechanism for how to do it. In one case, it may be simply just shooting it. In another case, you may have to shoot a sign. In one case, you may have to ask somebody for help numerous times. Do you see what I'm saying? There's not one way to get into every one of the doors. Matter of fact, corridor 10 is arguably the most ambiguous of them all. But let's say, for the sake of discussion, you don't want to just face off against the main corridors. Well, there's the optionals. The optionals are good for getting you extra weapons and extra enhancements. What I mean by enhancements? This. The game has 4 different forms of enhancements for you. One is called the Lander, which is Compile's mascot. There's 2 forms of that. A blue one, which extends your life bar. Oh yeah, I should mention this now. The Guardian, in humanoid form and in ship form, has a life bar. Your life bar can go down to 0, and you can still win the corridor fight, provided you don't take one more hit. So there is that. You can also extend the life bar, not just by finding the landers, but by leveling up. Your score, what happens is, as you reach certain score milestones, starts at 30,000, then 100,000, then 500,000, then 1 million, and after that it's 1 million every other time. There is a maximum, but I don't exactly know what it is. I think it's like in the high 20s, maybe it's like 32. The point is, your life bar can pretty much extend across the screen. Your maximum chip count is 4,000. How do we achieve that? Well, I mentioned the blue landers, which extend your life bar. The red lander, or a rander, increases your chip count. You start with a meager 50, and you go up to 100, 150, 200, 400, 800, and so on. The higher up you go, the more expensive the item you can buy in the shop, which is important, and I'll explain why in a minute. But also, with that, it also helps your gun a little bit, because your gun can earn a bit of a spread. There's also a power up in the game called Rapid Fire, which can be picked up 5 times, and it decreases the delay between between your bullets. I'll give you an example. It's like a 12 frame delay between one bullet to the next. After you pick up 1, it becomes, I believe, 5. Then 4, 3, 2, 1. Once you pick up the 5th one, you don't need any more. You just don't. You do need the blue landers, and you do need the red ones, though. There are other names you can pick up, and those are important also. They are the optional weapons. The optional weapons, with the exception of 1, have 3 different levels in the game. Blue, green, red. This, by the way, also corresponds to different mini-bosses and different corridor bosses that you will face. Green is effectively, when it comes to the corridor bosses and the mini-bosses, is the weakest they can be. Red is the strongest. In the case of your weapons, blue is the weakest, red is the strongest. However, every time you level up one of your weapons by picking up one of the same, it also increases the chip consumption that weapon uses. Your maximum shot count for any weapon is 255. But there is one weapon that does not use chips at all. It is expendable. It is called the enemy eraser. And while I don't know this for certain, the way I had it figured is the enemy eraser appears once every 15 pyramids that you shoot out, but only appears after you pick up your first one in in area 3, the jungle area. Now there are 2 other main enhancements that you need in the game. One is for your gun, which has a maximum of 4. The other is your shield, which has a maximum number of 7. The more shields you have, the less damage you take. The more gun icons, the stronger your weapon. Now this works for the gun, affects your main gun, the one you fire naturally, but it does to a degree affect your optionals also. Because if you look up the mechanics, because somebody actually has it broke down on GameFAQs, it actually shows the mechanics for your optionals. And depending on your gun level, yes, some of them are affected. So, obviously, if you have a stronger gun, they have more of an impact. That's just the way it is. And that's actually really, really important, because the stronger your gun, the less time it's going to take you to make mincemeat of a boss. And that's really important. Being able to power up your weapons, however, also is important because of one key factor. It'll help you really make short work of the mini-bosses as well as the corridor bosses. And by powering them up to their fullest potential, you might be able to do certain things against bosses that you couldn't do beforehand. Give you a perfect example. If you face Optimon, he looks like a big old Medusa eye, and there's 3 levels, remember. Green, blue, red. Well, if you get your fireball up to at least level, I believe, 2 or 3, you can actually do away with his seaweed that he shoots at you. Which is good, because if it hits you, it puts on a hurting. Trust me. And it also helps when you face a boss which is referred to as Clawbot, because it can take out that little pincher that's in front of him, and then you can waylay on him, and as our friends the rest of the message will say, attrition or regulate on them. So yes, and since it can destroy projectiles, guess what? You're pretty much good if you can get to level 2 or 3. But now it gets trickier, because the closer you get to the end of the game, the more dangerous and the more destructive your opponents can be. And trust me when I tell you, you do not want to miss a gun power-up, and you do not want to miss a shield power-up. This is why by the end of the game you want to have your max shields, your max guns. Because believe me when I tell you, when you get to areas 9 and 10, they ain't playing with you anymore. You either wreck them or you get wrecked. There is no excuses. You either know what you're doing or... But then again, truthfully speaking, the way they look at it is, if you can't beat the first boss of the game, which is a gun installation, guess what? They're pretty much saying to themselves, who's this idiot playing the game? No, I'm not joking. They're not saying it outright to you, but that's pretty much what they must well be saying. Now, graphically, this game is arguably one of the more advanced games that came out on the NES back in the day. Because, think about this. The game came out around 1988. So we're getting close. We're about 4 years away from the Super NES. But yet, around this time, companies like IREM and Broderbound were tapping into what the NES could do graphically. And it was actually kind of amazing. I personally was in awe just seeing it when I played it when I was a kid. And even today, playing it the way I play, no matter how I played it, it still blows my mind how they were able to do what they did with this game. Because it had the scrolling, it had the scrolling screens when it came to traversing the overworld, like you would see in Zelda. It had mini bosses. It had, the corridor bosses. It had shops. It had everything I could have wanted. This game, arguably, is one of the most perfect games for the NES that nobody's played. Think about this. This game, when it came out, how many people do you think really played it? Think about that for me. How many people sat down and played the Guardian Legend when they were a kid? Probably not many. Which is a shame, because we have to know this. Back in the day, video games weren't really heavily advertised. Not like they may be now, where video games are pretty much, a really big business. Back then, a company like Broderbound / IREM or Compile didn't really know if their game was going to sell. And here's this game that would cost you $2 at a Funko Land back in the day. And it is legitimately one of the greatest games you've never played. Graphically, it is damn good looking. It does have slowdown issues, I will say that much. However, consider this, and I'm going to give it a now. Think about how much shit they actually put on the screen, or can throw at you, especially at a high speed. Because not all the levels are just leisurely jaunt. Nope, some of them go straight through. They look like they're pretty much about the same length, but speed-wise, it can trick you and make you think you're shorter. The reason is because the levels move in a blink, especially the final main corridor before you go to corridor 21. If you don't know what you're doing, you get your ass handed to you. It's that simple. If you don't know what weapons to go in with, if you don't know how to handle it, you're just going to get, waylaid. That's simple, kids. The game, if you can find it, will probably cost you maybe $10 loose. I don't know how much a completing box would cost you. I haven't been able to find one, unfortunately. But I will say this much. This game, to me, means an awful lot. Like you don't know. This was a game that a relative of mine, when I was a young lad, owned, and when I played it, I got my ass handed to me. Now, here we are. It is almost 10 o'clock on January 15th, 2017. And guess what I can say? I beat the Guardian Legend. I beat, arguably, one of the best games on the NES that you, my friends, have never played. And it's a damn shame. So do me a favor if you can. If you go to a retro shop and you find a copy, pick one up. But I warn you, this game does not treat you with kid gloves. Not even at the very beginning. If you do not know what you're doing, you will get your ass handed to you. That's my promise. Shout out to the Retromancers for actually reminding me about this game. Because guess what, kids? It finally happened. I finally beat the Guardian Legend. Take care, my friends. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.